Hey marketing students, it's Nate. Wanted to give you a lecture on pricing, your very last topic of the semester. Congratulations for working so hard all semester long. So this will help you with this discussion board. The only remaining discussion board you have after this is your final discussion board, and I'll post that next week. So there's two chapters related to pricing, Chapter 16 and Chapter 17. Let me cover the key concepts that you need from each of those chapters. First off, Chapter 16. In Chapter 16, you'll see there's only two slides. We're talking about price skimming versus penetration pricing. Let me explain how they're different. Price skimming is a profit maximization strategy, whereas penetration pricing is a market maximization strategy, and they're different. So with price skimming, you're trying to charge the highest price that you can. An example of this would be where there's no substitute products and you have a captured audience that has no substitutes. For example, gasoline or pharmaceuticals would be examples of that. So you're trying to maximize profit as much as you can, as long as you can, before competitors come in with generic products and you have to drop your price. So that's a skim price. With penetration pricing, which is actually more common nowadays, you'll see it's a market maximization strategy. So in that instance, what you're trying to do is capture as much of the market, i.e. customers, as you can. In essence, you're trying to get as much market share early, particularly with the new product category, and choke out the competitors. We see this with consumer electronics. Apple will come in with a low price on their new tablet, hoping that it becomes the tablet of choice for most consumers, and then app writers and providers will write for that specific device, and the competition is kind of left behind. So that's a penetration pricing strategy, which is to penetrate the market and get as many customers as you can, versus skim pricing, try to get as much money as you can. That's it out of Chapter 16. So for Chapter 17, you see some different pricing strategies here. And start with slide 4 on the Chapter 17 presentation. And it talks about some different pricing strategies. Here you'll see things like reference, leader and bait, odd even, etc., as well as the concept of break even. Let me cover a couple of the pricing strategies that are on slide 4 of your Chapter 17 PowerPoint. Reference price. Reference price is the price that we expect to pay for something. It's the price that's in our head. So if I talk about a gallon of gas, you're not going to expect to have to pay $10 a gallon. You know that it's somewhere, in that $2.50, $3 range for a gallon of gas. A reference price. People have a reference in their head of what something should cost. So if you're launching a new product and your product is in an established category where people already have a reference price, you're going to have a difficult time charging a new price, even if the product is substantially better, because you're fighting against that existing reference price that people expect to pay. Leader and bait pricing. You see a lot of this during the holidays, leader and bait pricing, and they're slightly different. You've heard of, bait pricing, isn't that illegal? Bait and switch is illegal. Leader and bait are legal. Let me explain how they work. With leader pricing, this is typically with the goal of getting customers in the door, into the store. And leader pricing is often on a commonly purchased item at a very low price. We also call them doorbusters or lost leader prices. And the goal is to generate traffic and to get people in the store with the hopes that they'll buy some other things in your store after they've come in for that leader priced item. Thanksgiving, classic example would be frozen turkeys, right? It's like a 10-pound turkey for $1 or some ridiculous price. And hoping that you'll buy your other Thanksgiving groceries while you're there for that lost leader item. That's leader pricing. With bait pricing, the difference here is usually there's salespeople involved, or there's the intent to try to get the customer to the location and trade them up to something more expensive. Whereas in leader pricing, you're not trying to trade them up to anything more expensive. You're just trying to generate traffic in the store. With bait pricing, you're again offering a low price on something, and you're getting them into the store, and then you're hoping to trade them up to something more expensive. You see this in consumer electronics. You might come in for a laptop, and they've got a stripped-down, bare-bones version laptop available as a bait price. And then the salesperson is going to talk to you and ask you about your laptop needs and try to trade you up to something more expensive. This is done classically with automobiles, also with washers and dryers and those kind of consumer electronic staple items. where there's salespeople involved. They bring you in, they advertise a low-priced bait item, and they try to trade you up to something more expensive. So an easy way to think about the difference between leader and bait is leader is get you in the store, hope you buy some more stuff. With bait pricing, it's get you in the store and try to get you to buy a more expensive version of whatever is advertised as a bait item. Does that make sense? The next item would be odd-even pricing, and odd-even is simply things like $49.95, $69.95, kind of ending in those just under a new price point. So we get the sense that, hey, I paid under $70 for something. It was only $69.95, odd-even pricing. Price lining, also on your slide there, slide 4. Price lining is when they simply have one price for a whole category of items. Probably a familiar item would be in the fast food industry. They have value menus, or what they call dollar menus, where everything underneath that dollar menu is obviously $1. That would be a price line. We even see things like the dollar store, where the entire store is based on a price lining model. You go into Home Depot and you can determine what type of power drill you need. Do you want do-it-yourself or medium grade or contractor grade quality? And they're kind of in these different segments of quality and durability. And those would be different price lines. So price line is when you have a category of products that are within a kind of an expected price point, a reference price, if you will. Demand backward pricing. Demand backward pricing is a fancy term that simply means you start with what's the expected price that you can charge for the product. Now that is often driven by what competitors are charging, as well as what people have for a reference price for that product. For example, when I worked at Jack in the Box and I launched a ciabatta breakfast sandwich, this was a high-end breakfast sandwich. It was big, it was expensive, it was high quality, and it was competing with the lunch category of products. So people were trading away from lunch sandwiches, hamburgers and chicken sandwiches, and buying instead this ciabatta breakfast sandwich, which was about the same price. However, we had the problem that there was a reference price that people expected to pay for breakfast sandwiches, and those were about $1 to $2 less than what people would pay for a lunch sandwich. So with demand backwards, you have to figure out what is the price I can charge first, based on competitors' pricing, based on customers' reference price points. And then you have to build the product backwards from there so that you can still make your expected margin on the product. And typically we're looking at a 50% margin. So if you know you can only charge $5 for a product and you want a 50% margin, then you know you need to be able to make it for no more than $2.50 so that you can have that 50% markup. Right, so that's the demand backward pricing model. So it's what do I have to charge first and work back to what I can make it for. And then lastly, prestige pricing. Prestige pricing is simply the product is a high price because that is the image, the prestige of the product itself. So if you're Louis Vuitton or Tiffany and your sales are down and you're selling these prestige luxury goods, you're not going to drop price, because as soon as you drop price, you have kind of lifted the veil on your product, if you will, and you've reduced the ceiling, the expected price point at which people will pay. So one of the worst things you can do when you have a luxury item or a prestige product is just straight up drop price. That's a damaging strategy to do for those types of products, for those prestige products. Instead, what you'll see is they'll make the product smaller, or they'll bundle it, or they might do a temporary discount on the product as some type of promotional offer, but you don't just straight up drop price on a prestige product. So with prestige products, the product is expensive because that is the image of the product. Maybe you like to drink Cristal vodka, and you say, it's the best. Why is it the best? Well, it's the most expensive. Therefore, it's the best. It's the prestige. So it's the image and the prestige behind that. You might think that we're all smarter than that, but time and again, we see that many people will pay for the prestige component of a product. And we charge a high price just because of the perception that it's better because of the high price. Okay, so make sure you understand those. I would focus on reference, leader/bait, odd-even, price lining, demand backward, and prestige pricing, and understand those because those will be on the discussion board. And then the last item out of Chapter 17 is your break-even analysis. So break-even analysis is part of pricing, and the break-even formula is very simply fixed costs equal price minus variable costs. I'm going to write it on this piece of paper and put it on the screen so you can see it. So hopefully you can see that. I'm sorry, this is low tech, my low tech hack here. Break even equals fixed cost. That's your numerator. And on the denominator, you have the price of the product minus the variable cost of the product. So please check your book on that. Basically, what's important here is when you're breaking even, you're not making money, you're not losing money. You're selling at a price where you just cover your expenses. But obviously, we want to do better than that. So the reason that the break-even formula is part of the pricing chapter is because one of the things you can play with is price, right? So fixed costs are costs that are fixed. That includes things like rent and utilities and salaries. For example, if you rent your housing, the landlord doesn't care if you got laid off last month. The rent is still due. It's a fixed cost, right? It doesn't matter what your economic situation is. Same for a business. Fixed costs are costs they have to cover, regardless if the business is doing well or if the business is doing poorly. So to cover those fixed costs, you have a price for the item, the product. Say it's a t-shirt and it's $20 a t-shirt, and your variable costs are, say, $15 a t-shirt. That's the cost of the shirt itself, what we call cost of goods sold, as well as any commissions and other variable costs. So say you're selling a price of t-shirts of $15 and it costs you $10 in variable costs, the shirt itself and maybe a commission on each shirt that you sell for a salesperson is $10. 15 minus 10, I'm doing this backwards, $5. You would make $5 per shirt, right? We call that our contribution margin. And you apply that $5 per shirt up against your fixed costs. So let's assume you're making $5 per shirt, you're selling it at 15, it costs you 10 to make. And let's say you have $100 in fixed costs. Maybe you're working at the swap meet over the weekend and it costs you $100 to set up a booth there. Then how many shirts would you need to sell to break even? So if we knew that the price was 15 and the variable costs were 10, and you had fixed costs of $100, as you see these numbers here, fixed cost of 100, price of 15, variable cost of 10, you would simply divide 100 by 5, right? So it's 100 divided by 5. 15 minus 10 is the 5. And how many shirts do you need it'd be 20 shirts, right? 5 into 100, 20 shirts. So you knew that if you sold, if you had fixed costs of $100 and you're selling shirts at $15 a piece, and they each cost you $10 to make, you would break even once you sold 20 shirts. Now that's not very good to work and only break even. You'd want to obviously build in some profit as well. But if I asked you a question or two about break even, you could understand that formula. So make sure you check that formula. There's some good examples in the book. Bottom line, before you execute a marketing endeavor, it makes sense to do some break-even analysis. There's also what we call ROI, return on investment, which is slightly different. You'll get that in financial accounting. But it makes sense. I'm going to spend X on advertising. I expect to sell X number. How many do I need to sell to break even on this expense? That can be called break-even. That can also be called return on investment. So just have a bare bones understanding of what the break-even formula is out of Chapter 17. Okay, this will help you with your discussion board. Thank you for listening. And next week I'll have the final exam discussion board for you.